This video is going to be about favoritism and narcissistic / Jezebelic family systems, or family systems with generational Leviathan, which all of that means the same thing, by the way. I'm not even necessarily sure if I could call this favoritism, but it's something like that. Now, a lot of this is going to revolve around how you're going to be treated in general when you're the generational curse breaker. And I would say when you're the anointed one, but what a lot of people don't want to admit is that a lot of these Jezebelic people are broken empaths and broken anointed people themselves. They just decided to choose the dark side, or they just ended up getting broken down really badly and either completely losing their mind, or they're going off into Jezebelicness. And some don't even notice. Because I've met people that are obviously anointed or prophetic and they're lower ranking Jezebels. So they're still toxic and abusive, but not as much as higher ranking ones. Honestly, more in the borderline spectrum, because when you're borderline, pretty much you're really just a lower ranking narcissist that commonly isn't being toxic on purpose. But that's a whole nother video. So anyway, you're going to be treated some of these ways when you're the generational curse breaker. And yeah, I don't know what else I was supposed to say with that. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to summarize this as usual. I guess I could start off by saying that as the scheme of the enemy usually goes, I was of course supposed to be a secret that's then going to be aborted because that's really just how these situations go. Okay, there was way too much echo. So, what was I saying? Oh yeah, that's how these situations go a lot of the time. And if you don't end up getting aborted, there's just going to be a lot of situations that happen throughout your life that almost kill you or drive you crazy, because that's the end goal, which I could also make a whole video about that in and of itself. Especially situations I've seen with other people that have allowed the curse of death to just fall upon them, which I think I mentioned on the evidence channels, but I've been meaning to make a video about these boys in the feminine thug persona that, of course, are just broken boys and even girls that are just following along with the social conditioning pushed through the music industry and the media in general, which is really geared to brainwash people who already have certain trauma and generational trauma anyway, because all of it is trauma-based mind control and spells and stuff. And a lot of these boys are really depressed and want to die anyway. And so they don't want to take themselves out for different reasons. So they go out and do things to people to try to get somebody else to take them out. And yeah, and I've been thinking about that for some years. Especially with this one situation. Well, no. A situation with this boy I met in, what was that, like 2020, 2021? I think 2020. And then a situation with this other boy. Yeah, 2020 and then 2022. Especially the second one. Oh, I'm going off somewhere else again as usual. Wait a minute. So yeah. The enemy is going to be trying to take you out and use people as the agents for this, of course. Because there's definitely some legal rights with this. Although, depending on, how much protection is over you, the enemy really could just take you out without the help of other people. That's what SIDS is. That's generational curses and stuff. So anyway, luckily my mom decided to actually tell my dad that I existed, and I ended up not being aborted. And I know, well, I'm about to go off somewhere else again, but I've been wanting to make a video for some years too about the whole doing away with kids thing. Alive, well, not alive, born and not born. Everyone should already know that it was a racial eugenics agenda originally. But it's also like a lot of other stuff with it. And how some people, not in this situation, but some people think that like doing the baby a favor because they don't want the baby to live a life like they did, especially foster kids. And this is a mindset that I see a lot with people who have been through certain things. But like I said, that's a whole nother video, but there's that too, where people just feel like, well, I grew up in foster care and I wouldn't want my kid to have to go through what I did, or I wouldn't want them to get molested. It's honestly no different than the people who hide their kids in the house and never let their kids go outside, and then the kid isn't ready for the real world, or when they do try to go out into the real world, they feel like something's going to happen every time they do anything, and like a bird might come and bite their eyeball out, or they don't like know about certain risks, real risk, and then they end up falling into situations that could have been avoided. So it's the same thing. It's really like being a helicopter parent, but to an extreme, to the point where you believe it's better to just kill the kid so the kid doesn't have to go through certain things. And I'm just about to go off on my usual rant that has nothing to do with the point of the video. But it also makes me think of this other thing where, like, if you really didn't know the truth, it's easy to fall into a lot of different mindsets that people fall into and have normalized, because it's like a little bit of truth sprinkled into a huge lie. And now it honestly makes more and more sense about how if the days weren't cut short, even the very elect would be deceived. Because, okay, I don't really know how to put this exactly, but pretty much, if you really think about these different things that people have been conditioned into believing, it makes sense to a certain extent. And I totally see how people who don't really know the truth or don't understand how the universal and spiritual laws are set up. What was I saying? Anyways, it makes sense until it doesn't. And hopefully that's a good way to explain it. I get why somebody would feel that way, but I also know why, how regardless of how you feel, it's still wrong. So there's that. Honestly, I see how that argument can make sense for a lot of things. And it even goes back to what was it? It was 4 of them. The Freemason standards, order out of chaos, divide and conquer, which all of this is under the Hegelian dialectic, if I'm saying it right, because sometimes I say it wrong, which is pretty much just a lot of manipulation. and causing issues and then giving people the solution, which of course the solution would be the one world religion and monetary system and all that. How many did I name? Order out of chaos, divide and conquer. Okay, there's two. There's two left. I haven't talked about this in so many years. I don't even remember what in the world. Okay, I'm gonna put it in the description. Anywho, to get back to the point that this video is really supposed to be about, my mom told my dad about me, or about her being pregnant with me, and then crap hit the fan. Well, crap had been hitting the fan, but crap hit the fan again a couple times. And then I ended up going with my dad after a while. I went with him. Then we moved to NC. And I'm trying to mostly talk about the points because I really don't want to go off into too much of what little stuff I do even remember from my life or even from yesterday. And what happened after that? Oh yeah, so I had this one full sister. And so pretty much, no, I'm skipping a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, so when my mom and my dad were together, my dad was pretty much the stepdad of some of my mom's other kids, some other siblings, because I don't consider anyone half siblings. Siblings are siblings. That's something that okay, I'm about to go on something else that's irrelevant. So anyways, on my mom's side, it was about, 7 to 9 of them, something like that. I think 7. Let me not go into that, because it was 9. But, anywho, my dad was their stepdad for years before I was born. Honestly, I think 13 or more in total. And so what my dad always said was that they were common law married. Well, no. But that's what he used to tell me with my quote-unquote stepmom, which I'm not even going to go into that story, but I don't know. I think he was common law married to both of them, as he likes to say. So there was that. Then the whole thing where they split up, and my mom didn't want me anyway in the first place. Well, she never wanted kids. But anywho, I went with my dad, and so now I can go to the next thing. So my full sister, she of course felt some type of way about this because she felt like our dad liked me more than her, even though the reality is that when you have Jezebelic parents, they're not even living in their true self or their core self. They're split up people, split up as in they have multiple soul splits. So they're not even really alive, which I have a whole video about this. They're taken over by the enemy. They turn themselves over to the dark side. They're possessed. Okay, I had to burp for 3 minutes. But point is, they don't even know themselves or their kids. They're not even really alive. They don't even like their self. So really, it's all a fake aid. It's all a fake aid to traumatize everybody and push down generational trauma. An agenda that they're doing and they're the puppet for, but they don't even know it themselves. And they even tear themselves down more and more and kill their own self in the long run. But I'm not gonna lie, before my mom and my dad even separated, I always noticed that this specific sister, the one that eventually became the number one enabler to our mom, because as girls commonly do, who were mostly or completely raised by a single mom, quote unquote, they take all their anger from their mom and put it on their dad, who wasn't around, because they want somebody that they can still pretend to have. Because they really didn't have either parent because the mom was messed up too. But eventually, they just say, well, if I admit that both of my parents are messed up, then I'm not going to be able to pretend to have anybody. So let me just blame everything on the parent that wasn't even there. And then I can pretend that my mom actually wasn't messed up too, and that she wasn't the main problem, and I can just go on with my life and be an enabler. Because I remember on the evidence channels, I even would call her my enabler sister. Honestly, that's what I still usually refer to her as. I don't even really call her by her name, I just call her my enabler sister. Anyway, she never liked me, to be truthfully honest. Like, when I was a baby, she would lock me in boxes and tunkers and stuff in storage containers and carry me down the steps with our other sister. And they tied me to beds and everything. Of course, because our parents let them. And they would just, like, pretty much play with me like some type of baby doll. They would put me on coolers and then push me down the sidewalk. And I wasn't even old enough to hold on or talk or walk or stand. So I'd fall off, and they do all types of stuff to me, to be truthfully honest. But I noticed that she never liked me. And one thing that I mentioned back on the evidence channels was that she was a telltale sign that when I eventually moved in with my mom for the first time at 12, that I would go through cash for kids system abuse. Even though my enabler sister wasn't there, but it's like, she really showed me how that side, well, I don't even know how to put it, but it's like she was kind of like a future warning to the fact that I would eventually go through cash for kids system abuse and the Munchausen. Because she would always say that I act like I had Down syndrome. And yeah, she would just always tell me that I had these different problems when I was younger. And she would say I had only child syndrome and different things like that. And some of that was way before our mom and dad even separated. So I feel like she was like a prophetic warning almost to what I would eventually go through years later with all these different labels and stuff, and being quote unquote retarded and all those other things. And I also remember one time she would say that it didn't even matter that our dad would try to kill me every single day because at least I got to be around him. And it kind of reminds me of this one thing that my older brother said once after he came back in his mid to late 20s, because my mom and her husband, or her quote unquote husband, had kicked them all out at like 13 and 14. And my older brother, he didn't show back up till he was almost 30. And my enabler sister would talk junk about him. And our other scapegoat sister, she would talk junk about him for being quote unquote missing. Because of course people love to put out missing persons report and claim that their kids are missing. But anywho, my brother would tell me that when you have a dog, and I'm not trying to be rude, this is just what this makes me think of. When you have a dog, it doesn't really care if you beat on it or not, as long as you spend time with it and don't leave it alone. Now, honestly, I don't know how true that is, but that's just something he said to me once. So there's that. But yeah, so my sister was mad at me because of that too. Because she feels like, well, honestly, my dad has a whole bunch of kids also. And of course, that's what happens when people have generational trauma and they have sexual trauma, and then they start trying to, well, not they start trying, they start sleeping around and stuff because they're hypersexual. And also because sexual trauma in general can turn you out. And then you feel like you have to sleep around with people to pretend that you're not gay or bisexual or whatever from your trauma. And so then they do that because, of course, most people have been molested anyway, but of course both my parents were, and my dad was sex trafficked. So there's that. And then we found out about one more sibling, aside from the already 16 plus, we found about one more sibling on Ancestry in like, what was it, 2023, 2022? No, 2022. And then another unfortunate thing was that due to the trauma, my dad also was a prostitute. And I kind of feel like that's also another way that all these kids popped up. But as a side note, though, a lot of people talk about when their moms are prostitutes, but nobody ever talks about when their dad is a prostitute. But yeah, I used to mention this a lot in the evidence channels because a lot of people think that for you to like develop sexual issues or just be born with it, because a lot of people say you can't be born with them, but honestly you can, because that's how the generational spirits work. Because of course all abuse is a demonic ritual, and then it gives you soul fractures, and then spirits go into the soul fractures, and then there's also commonly curses that go along with that, and then the kids get it, and it's epigenetic. And so I was constantly breaking the myth that you have to like have something happen to you to end up with these issues, because I always felt like it was really just generational, even with the things that did happen, which honestly with what little things did happen, I was already messed up way before them. And I remember my dad used to talk junk about all the issues I had, but I mean, it's like, aren't we just, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. The point is, my older neighbor sister would also tell me about how all my dad's other kids, or at least the ones that we knew about, were, they felt some type of way about how I was the only kid our dad was around too. And I mean, I totally understand why. I always understood why. And I always felt bad for them, but honestly, it wasn't what they thought it was. And due to my dad's trauma and the brokenness and being turned over to the dark side and pretty much being a zombie, as I call it, he really wasn't able to do anything for himself. That and the fact that he had, of course, a Jezebelic, infantilized, and emotional incest mom. Like, ever since I first moved in with my grandma, along with my dad, when I was 8, because we had to move in with her when I was 8, I always felt like they were dating. And it was always really weird to me. I never liked how she was. I mean, who did, to be honest? But, yeah, I never liked how she acted like she was dating him, pretty much. And so anyway, she was another thing holding him back aside from all the issues he had from trauma, to where he really couldn't function anyway. But yeah, so my point with that is that it wasn't really what they thought it was, although I understand why they would want to be around their dad, but it wasn't what they thought it was. It was really just us moving around to like his different girlfriends' houses every other day. Or me just being with my grandma while he was like out trying to make some money in the only way he knew how. But yeah, it is really interesting how nobody ever talks about how not only the mom's prostitute, but it's a really upsetting trauma response, because that leads people into schizo-narcism even quicker. Or it makes it worse if they already are schizo-narc. Because as I mention all the time, the fastest way to become really demonized and become full-blown schizo is through sleeping around and or prostitution, which is really... about the same thing. Honestly, dating really is prostitution, because people are commonly dating somebody for emotional support or a place to stay. And then the next thing after that is doing drugs, or both of those things put together. Or constantly being in SA rituals. So whether you run to chumos every time you get upset about something, or because you have low self-esteem, and then you hop on Tinder and Grindr, and you look for people that are too old for you, those rituals will make you schizo. And then of course there's also a side where like you have no control over the situation, you're just being full-blown assaulted. But yeah, all of that. And anyway, so there was that side. And then there was also something that I noticed even more. My mom's last boyfriend came, well, not last. Okay, so the boyfriend from the evidence channels, that's what I mean by last. So, if anybody is here from the evidence channels, which honestly I doubt it, or at least I doubt that many are, for the 0 to 2 people that watch my videos. But, he was the one, I'm trying to think of which quote, I was like Kane from Power one, or, the one video that I really thought was funny that I still have, the whole situation, because narcissists love chaos. The one situation where my mom had got a job again because they got fired from the last one for attacking each other, trying to attack other people. She was backing out the driveway to go to work. And he was secretly outside, and so he snuck up on the car, got on the car and held on, rolled the car to the end of the neighborhood, and then when she got to the end of the neighborhood, he started banging on the car window, and he was like, "You hit me with your effing car. You hit me with your effing car." So a situation where he faked getting hit by the car. Or, well, that dude, that boyfriend. Or the one where I had a couple videos where he got mad because I wouldn't give him money. My mom got mad because I wouldn't give him money. And so they had made up this whole plan to tell the school that I had a gun, which of course I did, and that I was going to shoot up the school. And I barely even went to school due to the situation. But they made this plan to tell the school that I was going to shoot them up because she was mad I wouldn't give her boyfriend money. So that's the summary. So when he was around, especially a little before I escaped and ran away, there was this one day that I specifically remember where my brother was there because he had moved back in. My other scapegoat sister, which they eventually drove crazy, she was staying there at the time too, I'm pretty sure. And then my other sister with the husband, she was over that day. They were all sitting on the couch. So was my older enabler sister, and my mom's boyfriend, and my mom, and my younger siblings, and my nephew. And they decided to bring up my dad and when he was their stepdad back in the day. Which is honestly something that they did often. And something I noticed with my older brother is that his dad pretty much treated him the same way my dad treated me. Because his dad used to try to kill him a lot too. And so, what was I about to say? Oh yeah, I noticed that my older brother, the one who was quote unquote missing for some years, well more than some, but he wanted my dad to be his dad, and he really liked my dad, and it's all a really interesting situation. And then my mom would be mad about that because she felt like my brother should feel some type of way about the things that my dad did to her. And pretty much this is more so going to revolve around my dad, really, and how people treated me because of my dad. That's what the point of this video is going to be about. That's why I'm going to title it A Weird Form of Favoritism in Narc Family Systems. And so anywho, they were all on the couch, and they started talking about different jokes my dad would tell and how funny he was. Because my dad had the humorous trauma response, which I learned from him, and my older sister learned from him, and my younger sister learned from me. And my younger sister, who's my dad's kid, and also my quote-unquote stepmom's kid, she just developed it automatically, even though she's barely around our dad. And so anyway, they were talking about how, like, when they didn't have money to afford food, my dad would tell jokes about that, and how he used to, like, do art, and he had some drawing that he called Super Dookie, and it was about fecal matter saving people, and how my dad had this one friend, I guess that was his friend. It didn't sound like much of a friendship, but they said that the dude was an alcoholic, and that my dad would, like, play pranks on the dude, and he would put mustard and mayonnaise and stuff on his foot and then put it in the dude's mouth, which honestly, that sounds really suspect, but it makes sense now that I know. But yeah, it just doesn't sound the best. But aside from that, oh yeah, this one situation where my dad had heard that my mom had got a new boyfriend, and people started calling my dad Spider-Man because he climbed up the 3+ story apartment and climbed into my mom's window or to the screen door or something like that to figure out who the new boyfriend was. Honestly, that does not, I don't even know what to say about that. But there was that, how my dad would make this joke about how he was gonna whoop people's eyelids off. And just a lot of other things he said that I can't really remember. And I just remember feeling really, really bad for my mom's boyfriend while everybody was talking about this, while sitting on the couch. Like, honestly, I really felt bad for him because he just looked so mad and depressed and sad. And he was just, like, looking so dissociated. And I could tell he was thinking, so are they saying he's better than me? And honestly, this really just shows the issue of family systems and all this boyfriend, girlfriend stuff, and people just splitting up in soul ties. And, like, people can say what they want to say, but honestly, even with all the stuff that my mom's boyfriend did, I felt terrible for him that day, and I still do thinking about this situation. Because they were just talking about it like he wasn't even sitting right there. And he looked like he was about to burst into tears. And this is the issue. Well, I think I just said this, actually. I'm pretty sure I did, but this is the issue with all this multiple kids, multiple baby daddies, multiple baby mamas. Honestly, this isn't the issue. This is one of the small issues of this. But this is what happens when you have soul fractures and you're demonized and you keep trying to use people to fill voids. And, what was the next thing? Oh, yeah. Another thing I noticed is that my mom's boyfriend was jealous of my dad, not just because of the obvious reasons from that whole story, but he was jealous of my dad because he wanted me to see him as a dad. He also was jealous of my siblings' dad, even though he was really never around, because he wanted them to see him as their dad, too. Part of the reason is that his ex had lost all their kids to CPS. But what he also would, of course, leave out is that when his kids escaped from their group homes and were dating their choma boyfriends and girlfriends just to survive, because that's what people commonly, quote-unquote, have to do, they came around a few times and they would get so terrified from the stuff that he would do to me and my siblings, they would never come back around after that. Like, his daughter came around one day, and then my mom and her boyfriend jumped me, and then she never came back after that. But of course, as part of the feminine thug persona trauma response and being turned out from trauma, it also was always very obvious to me that my mom's boyfriend also wanted to be with my dad himself. So there was also that. And I think, oh wait, no, another situation when my dad got shot for the second time and died for the 19th plus time outside my window. There was a situation where I was telling my younger sister about it, and of course, they felt some, wait a minute, by that I mean my younger sister on my mom's side and my younger brother. They felt some type of way about me and my dad and me going with my dad, of course, because their dad didn't come around at all after, well, let me not even go into that, but he didn't come around at all. And of course they're going to feel some type of way about me because of that, because of course they're going to feel like, well, how come her dad sees her, but our dad never sees us? So when I told my younger sister that my dad had got shot, she just said, why would I care? Now, luckily, due to the fact that I didn't have cognitive dissonance, when this whole situation happened, I didn't feel any type of way about it. And I'm talking about my dad getting shot, not even the comment from my younger sister. Because the thing is, when you really let go of cognitive dissonance, you're more so focused on getting out of the situation. At that point, so I wasn't like crying or anything because I knew better. But of course, his well-being was a concern because he told me about how he had died and went to hell before a few times. And then another thing that I noticed, and I would talk about a lot in the evidence channels and would be shown a lot in the evidence channels when I was still doing those, was this weird rhetoric that my enabler sister would make. Even though my mom and my dad were working together against me, especially when it came to the Cash for Kids system Munchausen thing, or at least my dad eventually tuned in, especially once I started to stop lying to myself. Cause like I used to say, I already had been researching the truth and stuff for forever, specifically revolving around my situation at 12, like the whole psychiatry abuse stuff. 14 is when I really started to go deep into research, which is a very long story that I've talked about before, and I should probably make a video about it again. Because this was a point in time where a lot of people were hearing the term Jezebel, Leviathan, or quote-unquote narcissist for the first time. And it was through a YouTube, TikTok rabbit hole that I found out about this. And I always said that I would never get on TikTok, but I did. And this was after I came out of that coma for 3 days full, and then kind of 2 weeks plus of just being in a sleep-like state where I still really couldn't move or anything due to a long story. And then I was like, I completely have to stop lying to myself. I need to cut off all these people that don't like me anyway, never did like me. I need to stop being an unpaid emotional therapist for other people. And I need to focus on getting out of here. And so that's when my dad started to, well, I mean, honestly, he was always pretty risky, but he started to turn even more because, like I used to show a lot, and like a lot of people used to talk about, my dad would originally act like he wasn't okay with the whole cash for kids system, Munchausen thing, and he would go on these little rants about how about different things my mom was doing, and he'll be like, so she's saying you're slow or whatever, and he would say different things like that, just to eventually do the same thing himself, not for money or pity or anything, but just really like to gaslight me for fun. And so I remember a lot of people are like, dang, he's manipulative. How in the world is he gonna go on that little rant he did just those couple months back and do the same thing? But yeah, so even though they both had their same plan going together to try to trap me and manipulate me, due to how my sister felt about our dad, because of how she felt like he didn't like her, even though people like this don't like anybody or themselves, she started, well, not even she started, even before this, because I'm trying to figure out how to even summarize it, she always like had this story in her head going that me and my dad hated our mom and that he would be telling me lies about her, even though he honestly never talked about her. But she just had this thing going in her head that me and my dad were bad people, me and my dad hated our mom, he was calling CPS on our mom, even though I don't even know why he would do that. Of course he wasn't. It's like, but you know, people with these types of spirits, they have demons in their head telling them stuff that they know isn't even true, that doesn't even sound right or make sense. And they'll still say it out loud and let it come out their mouth and still push along when it's like it's not some weird mess. But yeah, anyway, she would say that me and my dad were planning on getting my mom put in jail with CPS. And it's just really stupid. And if anybody was here from the evidence channels, or is here, then you would know what I'm talking about. It was all just the usual chaotic, demonic stuff that makes no sense. In fact, it's a term for it, narcissist crazy-making behavior. So crazy-making stuff, just a whole bunch of chaos, pretty much. And I remember in one video, she had even told me that I treat people how our dad treats his hoes, just weird stuff. But yeah, she also had this idea in her head that me and my dad hated women and were like treating women bad, and it was just a lot of weird stuff that really didn't even make any sense. But yeah, so there was that too, which also revolved around me being treated funny, really because how people felt about my dad. And then there was this other situation too, where my dad would have these different girlfriends. This one girlfriend specifically, wait a minute, hold up. He had this one girlfriend specifically whose daughters, well, not even daughters, her kids didn't like me because they didn't want my dad to date her. Well, they didn't want their mom to date my dad. And I remember she had this one daughter that would be like, you and your dad are weird. I mean, honestly, she's not wrong, but she would always tell me about how she didn't like my dad and how I would never be her stepsister and different things like that. I'm not gonna lie, I felt bad for her situation though. Cause, because I was supposed to make a whole video about this whole situation way back when. But, well, not even this situation, but the situation that I noticed with her mom and her specifically, but that's another topic. Anyway, so there was that. And it kind of makes me think back to what I call Kiki's prophecy, which was another girlfriend my dad had that came after this lady. This lady's actually dead now. The lady who I just mentioned, this girlfriend with the kids. But, well, no, this one came actually some years after that. But my dad went around this one again, and then she died. No, she died more, well, okay, never mind, because I'm getting mixed up. But, how do I put this? Anyway, Kiki was a lady from the crazy argument videos that were in the playlist where my dad had went on this rant when he started manifesting about how, well, spirits were talking out of him, and they were saying, we've been alive, well, no, I've been alive for over 5,000 years, and he started threatening us and all that stuff. So when he started manifesting, eventually, the Kiki lady gave her prophecy, and she said that soon my dad was gonna die. He was gonna die alone because I was gonna get away, and then he wasn't gonna have anybody. He was gonna realize he didn't have anybody. And yeah, that was Kiki's prophecy. And that was way back there in the Part 1 channel. And honestly, as sad as that story is, and that prophecy is, I see it fast approaching more and more. And ever since 2020, he's looked worse and worse as the years go on, to the point where now more than ever, he has to post really old pictures, because he's just been looking worse and worse, and has been falling apart pretty much. And looks like he's constantly crying all day. But yeah, she really wasn't wrong though, because he is dying because I escaped. And what was the other thing? Oh yeah, I forgot a bunch of stuff. So, when I was 7, and my dad was staying with my quote-unquote stepmom. Now, one thing about this is that she was way too young to be with him, of course. So really what nobody really knew is that she wasn't even that much older than my sister at the time, to be truthfully honest. But before my sister had to move in with this chomo dude and his mom, who was of course the chomo, she was staying with me, my dad, and our quote-unquote stepmom, if I didn't already just say that. And eventually, my stepmom wanted her to leave because one, well, their excuse anyway, was that she wasn't nice to me. She, being my sister, was being mean to me, and they didn't have enough money. Or my stepmom said she didn't have enough money because my dad never had a job, and before he got it taken away, he did used to get SSDI because he was born with a hole in his heart, and he would have like strokes and heart attacks every day. And actually at this point in time, he was dying and had died a couple times, which that whole thing went on for some years, but that's another story. So, anyway, what was the other thing? Something that my sister even talked about in her own abuse videos that she tried to act like she didn't have when the whole thing happened where CPS snitched about mine is that she felt like my stepmom, which honestly that lady did, man, I'm not even gonna go into that. She felt like my stepmom and our dad liked me more than her, like they got me more stuff than they got her. And honestly, I really feel like my stepmom treated her really badly. But the thing with my quote-unquote stepmom is that she felt like my sister should be able to do things that honestly there aren't even, laws don't even allow anymore. So because my stepmom was parentified and she's been working, taking care of her little sister and paying bills since she was 2 and taking care of grown pedo men and really grown age regress broken men. She felt like that's what my sister should have been doing, even though she really couldn't, but there's a lot with that. Kind of just like how my old quote-unquote stepmom will like try to put it in my head, like especially when I went back to NC to figure out a way to check on my younger siblings back in like December. I really didn't want to see any of them, to be honest, but not any of them as far as my siblings, but I didn't really want to see her, but I kind of had to see my one sister. And like she was trying to put it in my head that I'm grown and all that, but honestly I'm really not, but I'm not even going to go into that. So, anywho, I wouldn't even take any advice from her. But, what was I saying? But yeah, so she did treat my sister funny because she felt like everybody should just be parentified like she was and have to do all those things that she had to do that she shouldn't have ever had to do and shouldn't have even been doing as much as she was doing then. Because honestly, then she was probably like, I don't know, 19, 20. And something that had been going on for a few years now that I also got to see myself when I went back to NC is that now she's dating some dude that's like almost 60. But she's gotten even worse since last time I was around her way back when. And I noticed that she does some of the same stuff that my dad did to her to him. And honestly, I feel bad for the dude. But yeah. And my old quote-unquote stepmom also told me that when I ran away, my older enabler sister had found her and messaged her and said that me running away was her fault. And it's like, I haven't seen this lady since I was 7 years old or talked to her. So how in the world could my old quote-unquote stepmom be the reason I ran away? And that's the thing that I noticed and a lot of people who watch the evidence channels notice. My older enabler sister is playing surrogate spouse and has been doing it for years for our mom. And this is something I used to talk about a lot on the evidence channels. I remember some lady even said that my older enabler sister was like a mommy dearest type person. And the fact that my older sister calls our mom mommy. I remember my mom's boyfriend even said, y'all are the oldest kids I've ever known to call your mom mommy. But yeah, anyway, so there was that whole situation that made my older enabler sister feel like people liked me more than her. And my stepmom, or quote-unquote stepmom, she wasn't nice to me either. In fact, as she went deeper into her depression due to my dad and different things that were being done to her, she started to treat me worse and worse. And I've never liked her level of cognitive dissonance and dissociative amnesia. It's like she literally just pushes through life with dissociation and just acting like nothing ever happened and things never happened to her. Those are some dangerous people to be around. But anywho, that's how I always felt about her. The next thing with my older enabler sister and how she started to feel types of ways about me because of my dad was, what was it? Oh yeah, so when my mom and her husband were starving my older siblings that were living with my mom, including this one full sibling, which is my older enabler sister. When my sister was able to tell my dad about it, for a while my dad was able to bring all of them food. And so eventually he had to stop doing it because he said he couldn't afford it anymore. And the reason my dad was able to do this was because even though my mom's quote-unquote husband at the time was way taller, way bigger, way buffer than my dad, he was terrified of my dad. And there's so much I could say about that. But yeah, so there was that whole situation. And honestly, I mean, so many people are to blame in this situation. But when you want to pretend you have somebody you don't, you blame shift on everybody else. Because my older neighbor sister actually had a point in time where she did stop lying to herself for a little while. And she stopped calling both of our parents mom and dad. And she would call them by their name. And my dad thought that she only did it to him, but she did it to our mom too for some years. But then she went back under the mind control to make herself feel better. And it was something else. Oh yeah, and then she eventually started to call our dad my dad. And so she would say, you and your dad this, you and your dad that. And then my mom would also do the thing that Jezebelic moms commonly do, where she would be like, oh, she would say I was just like my dad. There was also points in times where she would say, well, where they all would say, I'm like her boyfriend, but that's another story. And to clear up any confusion, the husband is a separate dude from the last boyfriend.